Today we are in Nunnelly, Tennessee, where we have the Piney River, which is my favorite river in Middle Tennessee. And I'm going to put in the kayak here, and hopefully I'll have some fish catching videos here shortly.
I continue to have challenges with my mic on my GoPro, so here I am with the voiceover yet again. So at the Piney, the put-in is actually on a kind of tributary off of the Piney. So this little creek actually connects to the Piney, and then you begin the float. So as you can see, you have limestone off to the left. The Piney is kind of well known for being one of the most beautiful rivers in Middle Tennessee because it's gravel bottom, gravel and sandbars, very little mud, and so it's usually crystal clear. And this day was no exception. So, as you know, the smallmouth bass enjoy crystal clear water, and so you tend to find a bunch of smallmouth bass in the Piney. It is by far the prettiest river. I enjoy it thoroughly. The colors are amazing, reminiscent of beautiful Caribbean islands in some cases, especially when it's a sand bottom, which you'll see a little bit later. But I had to back my kayak, which is a bona fide SS 127 fishing kayak made for, or I guess to accommodate the chunky brethren. I also bought a SS 107, the shorter version, for my wife, and also when we travel, it works a little bit better when we travel with our camper. But you see the limestone here, the blue water, constantly running. The Piney's unique because it has spots that are deep, but it hasn't rained in some time, or at least worthwhile. Fall in Middle Tennessee, you can see the leaves on the top of the water, which make it difficult to use some of my topwater lures that I prefer, most notably the Whopper Plopper. Later, I do get a catch with it, but it's not ideal. Every time you cast, you get a little something hung up, a little leaf or something. It can be very, very frustrating. But it's beautiful. If you've ever been to Middle Tennessee in the fall time, the leaves changing, it's as beautiful as it can possibly be. It probably stands up to anywhere in the country short New England in the fall, which, you see some really brilliant colors. But we're very blessed, fall time in Middle Tennessee to have great fishing. Unfortunately, though, this day I didn't get to fish as much of my favorite lure. I was getting, frankly, leaves hung up on every lure because, it's coating the bottom as well. So if you're trying to fish the bottom and kind of drag across, you're going to end up with leaves there as well. So it was a little frustrating, but this is kind of the start of the river, and it gives you an idea how pretty it is, how clear it is. And here I'm kind of getting things squared away. You can see here shortly, you'll see there's a dog that came by, and I think he was looking for a ride. There used to be a dog on the Piney River that would routinely ride with you. You jump in your canoe and ride all the way down to the takeout. I heard recently on some of the message boards or Facebook groups that dog passed away, but we've certainly given him a number of rides. And if it's any testament, if St. Peter allows me someday at the pearly gates to enter, I imagine heaven to be similar to this. So look at this water. It's unbelievable. So here I am. I'm fishing with the Nico Craw Ned rigged. Sorry about my dog snoring in the background. This is my first catch, And I brought in a number. I was alone this day, but I brought in a number of rock bass. And you'll find a little bit later in the video that I caught a really good one, a really impressive one. This guy left a little bit to be desired in size, so I quickly release him, but you'll see a number of these guys. I particularly like grabbing these guys because you have to lay their fin down like a bluegill or else they'll stab you pretty good. But if you grab them right off the bat and they realize they're caught, they slap their tail against your wrist over and over again. You'll see it as I do it, as I catch a number of these guys, but I always have a chuckle when that happens. This guy was actually a decent size rock bass. Trophy rock bass are 10 inches or over, so it's not a fish that gets crazy large, but there's still trophy rock bass out there, similar to like a shoal bass or something like that don't get super large. But this guy, I think, came out to be roughly 9 inches. And a couple weeks ago, I fished this river, and I caught, I believe it was 7 or 8 rock bass in between 9 and 10 inches. And not a single one of them were 10 or higher, which is considered a trophy fish by the Tennessee Wildlife and Resources Association, I think is what a TWRA, our game warden group. I brought in a number of these guys, and you'll see it's all on the Nico Craw, all typically around boulders or rocky bottoms. Here's another one here. I believe I'm about to set the hook. It was a little windy. There's a little bit of rain, not much, maybe 10 minutes of rain. Here I set the hook, bring in another rock bass. And again, you can see his top fin stick straight up. If you don't rub those back, push them back, and they catch you, you're going to be bleeding. So here I am rubbing him back, and he's probably slapping his tail against my wrist. It's the same deal over and over again. You'd think you have the same fish. This one wasn't super large, but again, always fun to catch. I had a little bit of difficulty getting this hook out and had to pull out the pliers. I had them upside down so I could see a little bit better. Unfortunately, I'm at the point in my life, chunky fella's life here, where focusing on small things up close can be a little bit of a challenge. I've moved on to the I forget what they're called, progressives or whatever, where you kind of see through the bottom of the glass and it's a little bit bigger for you. So, but anyhow, this is I had walked down a little bit and fished some rapids, but as I was walking up, I was like, look at this water. It's just crystal clear. You see my kayak, it just looks like a picture I'd normally take with the blue-green in the background. And, I'm telling you, this river is always worth visiting. They actually have a campground as well. So the shuttle service is Pinewood Canoe and Camp. And the folks there and the lady that own it have always been, great to me, my brother, my friends that fish it with me, and they'll shuttle us. It's awesome. But there's also an RV campground down the road a little bit where we'll sometimes stay with the kids, and we'll pull out a chair and just sit in the river. We can bring our cooler and set out all our chairs and just sit there and enjoy the beauty and the cool water. I suspect a number of the little creeks that connect to the Piney are spring-fed because the water is always much cooler. It has some deeper spots as well. But yeah, definitely much cooler than other local Middle Tennessee rivers that aren't connected to a dam. Of course, the Caney is connected to a dam, so it's going to have super cold water. The Elk, the same thing, connected to a dam. That water's coming out at the bottom, It's going to be cool, and that's where the trout hang out anyway. But you can see here, I mean, it's started to rain on me a little bit. Didn't keep me from fishing. Obviously, the fish, they tend to feed in the mornings and in the evenings. So if it's pretty overcast and kind of mimicking that same look, sometimes they'll feed all day long. And it seems like the rock bass certainly did that here. Here I've set the hook into another rock bass. There were a bunch of boulders across the way there that I was trying to fish, routinely getting hung up, and I've probably lost a number of lures over there over the years, but it's always fun to throw in between those boulders and where smallmouth and rock bass tend to hang out, underneath or whatever. And I always seem to get bites right here. These rivers can change in time. If it gets a whole bunch of rain, all of a sudden, these corners can change. The river will begin to cut corners or take out a rock or a large boulder or something. And it will completely change the way it looks. Here, I dropped the rock bass. Thought it went in the water and had to jump out of the kayak because I realized I'm suffocating the poor guy. So I couldn't figure out exactly where it was. I believe it was under my kayak chair, which thankfully I realized he didn't land in the water. And we were able to do a quick rescue here and get him back in the water. We're moving towards the only topwater catch I got here, which I didn't get fully on camera. But this was a smallmouth, a decent sized, pretty smallmouth that I caught. It was a pretty blow up, and I'm sorry that I missed the recording of it because that's literally my favorite thing to see is a smallmouth blow up on a topwater. But he was pretty. And I was excited about it. In fact, right before this smallmouth, before I caught him, I saw what I imagined to be somewhere between a 3 and 4 pound smallmouth that was, I assume, injured somehow, kind of like laying flat on the rocks of what would be to the left of me over there. And I kind of went over to see if it was still alive. And I thought, sometimes, especially with the whopper plopper, is pretty bad for it. But I was thinking I might be able to help him if he has a lure stuck in his mouth and can't open his mouth. So I was trying to get him with my net and just failed miserably. He was much deeper than I thought. And he actually jumped and swam away. So hopefully he'll be okay. But as you can see, this is, some pretty smallmouth markings. Always love to see it. Love to bring a smallmouth in the boat. Unfortunately for me, this was the only smallmouth of the day. But it was a great blow up right over a log, came out of the water and really attacked it. Unlike me here, I'm trying to fish downriver, which is not something I have any success at ever. But I saw that rock off to the right there, a giant boulder. These things you can actually see often where it came off of a cliff or a bluff on the side. And I just, it was massive, and I knew that there has to be a smallmouth under it somewhere, and I figured I'd try to give a cast downstream. I knew if I went past it, I would probably spook the smallmouth, but this is the Piney in a nutshell right here. If you see that giant rock, there are boulders that, take up a huge portion of the river, and there are always rock bass and smallmouth underneath it. This is kind of a popular portion of the river here, and actually the first place I caught a smallmouth was right here in the Piney. I remember I caught a 17-inch smallmouth, and then on the very next cast, my brother caught a 17-inch smallmouth, and we joke still today that it was the same fish. Because, when you catch the same size fish, of course, mine was clearly bigger. I don't care. But if you see this large rock off to the left, all the youngsters who paddle the Piney, they get off here, they jump up on that rock, and they jump out into the pool. And on a Saturday or Sunday, you'd probably see, 15 kids here. Actually, here we're in my favorite portion of the river here, and I believe this is, yeah, I think so. I missed with that first hook set and cast it back out again, and this is actually where I catch the prize rock bass, which I was super excited about. And I immediately recognized, I know I'd previously caught a 9-incher, but when I looked at this guy, I was like, he's it. He's my prize. I've never caught a prize rock bass before, and I was super excited. And, of course, I wanted to, as you can see, he fell off the lure there, and I was, like, trying to put my foot over him to make sure he didn't flop out of the boat because I was certain he was a prize. And so I'm wetting the board and trying to see if I can get him on the hog trough, and hopefully he doesn't jump off, because I was certain he was a 10-incher for sure. And I kept trying to close his mouth. I'm like, I hope they don't give me any problems if his mouth isn't closed, because he did not want to close it. But you can see it's about 10 1/4, and a 10-inch is a prize fish in the state of Tennessee. The TWRA actually offers a angler recognition program, and these are the minimum sizes of trophy fish here. And you're able to, submit that to the state, and the state will send you a certificate. If you catch a number of trophy fish, you can actually get, a patch to put on your hat or whatever, on your fishing vest or something that's like Master Angler 1, Master Angler 2, or whatever. I think you have to have like 5 trophy fish to get the patch. And while I've had some trophy fish, I never documented it previously, so we're just now getting started, I guess. Here we are with another rock bass. This pool right here is kind of a massive area. I've caught a drum here that probably was 8 pounds. It's everybody stops here and swims, so you rarely get to fish it without risking hooking somebody. But I happened to be out there on a weekday, and so for the first time in a long time, I was able to fish it. And as I'd mentioned previously, all the success for the day, other than the one smallmouth, was on the Nico craw. And this same Nico craw I used the entire day. I mean, those things you can hardly tear them apart, much less the fish. So they last a really long time. I know they're more expensive, but to me, they're worth it. As you could probably imagine, I have very little viewers and views, so there is no endorsement. I can assure you that I really do like the bait. I was super disappointed right here. Actually, I don't think I catch a fish here, but the reason I recorded this was because as I was trying to get unsnagged there, a giant bald eagle flew right over my head. And you see me turn to the left and try to get the camera pointed up, but I didn't quite get a good view of it, but it flew directly over my head, and it was huge. So you can see the large gravel bar off to the left here, and I'm still trying to fish top water just because there aren't a bunch of leaves on the top of the water here. But you see these types of gravel bars practically everywhere on the Piney. It's probably important to note, though, that most of the land is private property, so occasionally you'll come across people who are sitting on their land and just making sure, this happens mostly on Saturdays, just making sure nobody gets out on their sandbar and they give them problems. I've talked to a number of them before, and usually it comes down to the fact that people tend to leave their trash and all that on the sandbars. These folks don't really care that much, but when you trash their land, it upsets them, as you could probably imagine. I'm no legal expert or anything like that, but I know if I'm floating on the river, I'm on no one's land. And I have a right to float on the river. Now, what you often see, especially on a beautiful river like the Piney, as I kind of kind of float down and you can get an idea of what everything looks like here. These younger crowds, the college age folks, often leave their beer cans or, their styrofoam coolers and all that. So usually with my group, the people I fish with regularly, we try to pick up, trash to try to keep the relationship good. Look at this. Do you want to, put yourself in a situation where you don't get to see a cliff like this because, some law changes or something? I would much rather keep the land beautiful and pick up after other people. I know I've picked up tires, all kinds of stuff, and carried them out. And I think the mentality of leave no trace is the popular camping mentality. I think that we like to apply that to the rivers as well. Most of these rivers are in kind of a watershed where, there might be a freeway or an interstate or something like that where, if it rains really good, you should probably expect. Look at this, guys. That's just majestic. It is awesome. Anyway, sorry. You should expect that if it rains really hard, the stuff on the side of the road ends up in the river. And that's why the Harpeth River in particular became one of the dirtiest rivers in Tennessee, even though it's beautiful. And I spend almost every weekend on the Harpeth River, and I love it. And, as a kid, maybe I threw, a piece of trash out the window and never thought to myself, that'll end up in the river. And people don't understand that. And that's how it works. And, when it comes to environmental issues, now they're saying across the entire world that rivers are polluting the oceans. So this is kind of where it all starts. When you throw something out the window, it ends up in the watershed, it ends up down in the river, and then the river goes into the Duck River or whatever, the Mississippi River, and then all of a sudden it's in the Gulf and in a big trash heap in the middle of the South Pacific ultimately. And it's just sad. I don't want to live that way. Maybe I did once upon a time, and I'm happy to change. The remainder of the float here is mostly just paddling. I didn't have a lot of structure or anything to fish on. It also gets pretty shallow right here until I believe it's Old Mill Creek empties in, then it picks up the flow a little bit more. But, without the rain recently, it's been a little bit of struggle. I had to do a lot of dragging. Chunky fella does not like to drag a kayak over rocks and would much rather float. But, it is what it is, and I want to go after the smallmouth, and so I'm always willing to drag if I have to. But I think Old Mill Creek is coming up here on the left, joining the Piney, and then not too far after that, you have Pinewood Canoe and Camp up on the right, and their second property, the large property where people often camp, with tents and whatnot. I don't think they have an RV campground, but it's a really nice spot. Would love to own some land like that someday because this river is truly, truly special. I have a couple of pictures here towards the end of the video that kind of give you an idea of just how beautiful this river is. And, the fall colors in addition. It was awesome. Tight lines, everybody. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again.